Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com. Going to jump on board, talk a little bit about last night's, Cavaliers completely outclassed last night, Alex. I mean, it was a whooping. But we saw a similar type of game last year in game number one. Golden State won that game last year by 15, last night by 22. But does last night's game feel a little different than last year's game one?
Yeah, it definitely felt different in my opinion. Kevin Durant just makes such a huge difference in this series. He's so important to the Warriors and their success on both ends of the floor. He's really good at switching and defending multiple positions. And obviously last night, 38 points, he was just dominant. There were so many times where he got to the basket so easily and got an easy dunk. He was creating for others. It really made a difference for the Warriors. I think that's going to be, the main thing throughout the series is how they utilize Kevin Durant and then what kind of adjustments Cleveland can make to try to slow him down. Tyronn Lue said last night that this is the best team he's ever seen. LeBron talked about how KD is the real difference maker here and how he's really the X factor in this series. He's just such a talented player. So I think, the series isn't over. I think some people are already crowning the Warriors. The Cavs are a good enough team. They shoot the ball well enough to where they can, go off and have a strong game and even this thing up or make it more competitive, even though last night was a blowout. But they do have to figure out a way to slow down Kevin Durant, and they have to limit their turnovers especially.
What was the biggest noticeable difference between these two teams? If you thought these two teams were on a collision course and it was going to be a great series and they were very comparable, what last night might have changed your opinion? Where is the big difference between these two teams, at least for game one?
I think there's two things. I think the first one is the sloppiness. Cleveland had 20 turnovers and Golden State had 4. That was a record low for an NBA Finals game. They tied the record low. So Golden State protected the ball extremely well. They were efficient, whereas Cleveland, they were sloppy, turning the ball over. 20 turnovers against the Warriors is usually going to lead to a loss. They are so good at creating points in transition and scoring off your turnovers that you can't turn the ball over that many times against them and expect to win. And the other thing, I think, is just depth. You look at the Warriors, there were times where they could take Steph Curry and Kevin Durant out of the game and still be able to hold their lead with those guys on the bench. That's 2 MVPs on the bench, but they still have Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and a number of contributors out there, Andre Iguodala, that are capable of holding leads or even, growing leads. Whereas you look at the Cavaliers, LeBron James really can't leave the floor. As important as he is on both ends of the floor, they need him in there almost every possession. And I think you're going to see throughout the rest of the series, he's probably going to play almost every minute of the game. So I think that's the biggest difference. The sloppiness that we saw last night, and then the fact that Golden State, they can rest their stars and kind of lead, put multiple rotations out there, whereas the main star for Cleveland, LeBron, can't really leave the court. Otherwise, they'll lose their lead or they'll fall behind big.
Alex, I want to go back to Kevin Durant for a minute because are you seeing a different Kevin Durant now than ever before in the postseason or the regular season? And also, he did miss some time with that sprained MCL. Do you think that has any effect on how he's playing in the postseason now, maybe a motivating factor for him to really get the job done?
I think he's stepping up, on his biggest stage. Whenever he made his decision to leave Oklahoma City, it was all about winning championships and getting back to the finals and being able to win a ring. So, last time he played the NBA Finals when he was with the Thunder against Miami, he played really well. He averaged over 30 points per game. He's always been someone that steps up, on a big stage and has done really well in the finals. So it's not, hugely surprising to see him have a huge game one. I think that the biggest difference is that he has so much help around him now that, he doesn't have to take over a game by shooting the ball, 30 times. He doesn't have to, hold the ball as much. He doesn't have to play as many minutes. He's able to pick and choose now and be more efficient. And that's really what he's been trying to do all season long. I think that because he doesn't have to do as much on the offensive end, he's become better on defense. He switches more and is better on the perimeter and interior. And then on offense, rather than, going into ISO and forcing contested shots, he can swing the ball around and then let it come back to him and get open looks. And you really never saw open looks for him in the past. Last night I saw a really interesting stat. before last night, his high in a postseason game for dunks was 4, and then he had 6 dunks in the first half alone last night. So the amount of help around him is just making things so much easier for him, and you can tell he's way more comfortable in this kind of role than he was, having to do everything for the Thunder.
One of the things Mike and I talked about as well was that Cleveland, we tried to compare it almost to a football analogy, like back when the Eagles had Michael Vick, and opponents would try to prepare for Michael Vick by taking like a speedy wideout and throwing him in as to be on the scout team. And then you got there and played Michael Vick and thought, oh my God, this guy's way better than the guy that we were going up against each week. Cleveland, in essence, never really were able to see how good the Warriors were because all the teams that they played in the postseason up to this point didn't prepare them for what they got last night against the Warriors. How do they make the adjustment then, now that they have seen it? Is that the eye-opener that they needed, and will they be able to adjust?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. This Cleveland team, they played well, obviously, throughout the Eastern Conference playoffs, but there were a number of scares. I think if you look back, they weren't as dominant as they should have been. That sounds crazy with their record, but there were times they almost lost to Indiana. There were times that they looked vulnerable against other teams. So I think this was a wake-up call for them. This was, obviously the litmus test for them. This is the best team that they're going to face, maybe as long as this team is together, just because this Warriors team is just so talented. Everyone's healthy right now. I don't know if, we're going to see this Warriors team this good again. You never really know with a team like this. I think people assume they're going to be together for years, but you never know. But so, yeah, I think this is really the biggest test for them. I think all year long they've had the Warriors kind of circled. They knew they were going to have to face Golden State if they wanted to repeat as champions. But, yeah, this is the real first test for them, and I do think it's a challenge. They're the only team in the NBA that, has the star power that Cleveland has, or more star power than Cleveland has. So, on most nights I think the Cavs can get away with maybe being a little bit sloppy or not playing their best basketball, not making all of their open shots because they have Kyrie Irving who can just score an ISO. They have LeBron James who can put up monster numbers. They have a good, supporting cast with Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson. Against the Warriors, you have to play perfect basketball, and I think that's what Cleveland's realizing.
Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com with us here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Tyronn Lue, if he's sitting there watching the tape right now, what's some of the adjustments? I don't know how you see. Durant is the big difference maker, and I thought that I had Golden State in 5, Durant MVP. I don't know how they make adjustments defensively to be able to match up with Kevin Durant. What's Tyronn Lue doing over these next couple of days to try to compensate for that? And it's amazing that we're saying this. I mean, everybody would say that LeBron is overall a better player than Durant is, but Durant seems to be the biggest X factor right now.
Yeah, and really last night LeBron struggled covering Kevin Durant. There was at one point Kevin Durant was 6 of 8 shooting against LeBron, so LeBron wasn't slowing him down at all, and that's really concerning for Cleveland because that's their best bet. They have to just hope that LeBron plays better defense going forward, and then you can do certain things. You obviously want to keep LeBron on him because I think he's their best perimeter defender, and he's the best matchup for Kevin Durant. But maybe you throw a second defender at him at times. You have to be careful doing that though because there's always shooters around Kevin Durant. He's really good at finding Steph Curry, finding Klay Thompson, finding Draymond Green, all these shooters that they have on the floor. That's why it's just so hard to beat this team, because if you do double one of their players, they are going to make you pay by swinging the ball around and finding the open shooter. And usually they have 5 shooters on the floor. Everyone can knock down shots. So that's why this team is so difficult. If you're Tyronn Lue, I think, you're hoping LeBron can step up and play a better defense. You're hoping that the Warriors don't shoot the ball as well. There was a number of times last night that, the Cavs played perfect defense, and the shots were still falling for Golden State. There's one in particular where Tristan Thompson was all over Kevin Durant, and he drained the 3 anyway. So I think, there's certain things that they can do, like switching up some schemes and trying to funnel players different areas and maybe changing some of the other matchups aside from Durant. You want to keep LeBron and Durant. Maybe you look at some of the other matchups, but really I think they just need to hope that Golden State doesn't play their best basketball, because when this team is clicking, I'm not sure there is a defense that can contain them.
Yeah, it's almost like you're hoping that Durant just or Golden State has a bad, like, that's your hope, is that they don't shoot well, and that's just not a recipe for winning the series.
Exactly. I mean, this is a team that has won 28 of 29 games. You know, they last lost their game. Their last loss was April 10th, and in that game, the reason they lost is because in the fourth quarter they rested their starters against Utah. So really, their last real loss was March 11th, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, this is a team that hasn't lost in a very long time in a meaningful game. And then you look at this postseason, you know, everyone's made a big deal out of the fact that they're 13-0 so far, but it's not even just that. It's how they're winning games. In 8 of those games, they led by 20 points. I mean, they're dominating teams right now. It's just not fair. So I think that's where, if you're Cleveland, you have to hope they have an off night. You have to really play your best game and hope that those two, you know, things happen at the same time in order to get a win. Because right now, this Golden State team is playing incredible basketball, and that's been the case for the last, you know, 30-something games.
To your point there, Alex, I thought one of the stats that jumped out to me last night, I mean, on the surface, if somebody said, well, how did LeBron do? 28 points, 15 rebounds, you think, oh, hum, a double-double, LeBron did his part. But the stat that jumped out to me when I looked at a little closer at the box score, LeBron James' 8 turnovers were double the amount that the Warriors had as a team. Does that speak to the Warriors' defense or the Cavaliers breaking down?
I think it speaks to the Warriors' defense. They did a terrific job last night of putting LeBron in uncomfortable positions and then also reading his passing. There were a number of plays where LeBron would drive to the basket, and then when he would try to kick the ball out, you know, a Warriors player would jump into the passing lane and intercept it. Klay Thompson did it once or twice. There was a few other times that happened. So I think that, you know, they did a really good job of preparing for LeBron and, you know, kind of figuring out his tendencies, where he's going to swing the ball to, where he's going to pass the ball. So I think the 8 turnovers were, you know, partially him being sloppy and trying to take over the game whenever they were down by a lot, but also the Warriors being able to read what he was doing and defending him very well. The other stat of LeBron's that jumped out to me was he had the worst plus-minus of anyone in the game. He was a minus 22. So, you know, that may have, you know, obviously that's because he was on the floor the most and, you know, Golden State just kept pulling ahead, but that's always concerning as well when your best player, you know, has the worst plus minus of anyone in the game. You know, I think that was another stat that was interesting to me. So they need, you know, better play from LeBron on both ends. Really, he can put up those numbers, but he needs to protect the ball and be efficient as well.
You bring up plus minus, then on the opposite side of things, Alex, Steph Curry was a plus 20, and Steph Curry obviously 28 points and 10 assists. Mike always says that Kevin Durant and LeBron are like on this 1 level, and Steph is like a 2. Did he play like a 1 last night, and can he continue to play at that level?
Yeah, I think we saw, you know, he can still have those kind of MVP performances. There are times where he defers too much and he's too passive. I think he, you know, doesn't want to step on Kevin Durant's toes. But now you see that they've kind of figured out how to both be able to score at the same time and both be effective at the same time. You know, last night he had a monster game. You mentioned, you know, how many points he scored. He had 3 steals. He shot the ball really well. He was really efficient. So I think this is a team that has figured out how to play together. They don't force shots. They know that they have enough good scorers on the floor that they can just go find the open shooter and basically take turns getting hot. There were times last night where Durant was just on fire, you know, scoring multiple times in a row. And there were times where Curry was knocking down, you know, pull-up threes and scoring the ball easily and, you know, celebrating by kicking his feet out. You know, this team is just so good and has so many weapons. It's so hard to slow them down, especially whenever they're clicking like this and they have this kind of chemistry. And this is year 1. That's the crazy thing to me. You know, as I kind of think about what they can do going forward, yeah, you know, this team has been together without Durant, but what's this team going to be like in 3 years whenever, you know, they have even more chemistry? Year 1 in Miami, whenever LeBron, Wade, and Bosh came together, was a disaster in the finals. You know, I'm just really curious to see what happens over the next few years and how good this team could potentially be.
Now, that's an interesting point because you got to wonder what the NBA is looking at, thinking, okay, we got this dream scenario, we got this trilogy, we got this three-peat, and boom, we got a blowout. We potentially could have a short series, and this Golden State team's not going anywhere. I mean, the three-peat might be great in terms of, yes, we got what we wanted, but long-term, what is the NBA thinking if this is a short series and this is just year one of this Golden State team?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a problem because the NBA does want parity. I think you look at the NFL, every fan base enters the NFL season feeling like they have a shot, or at least most fan bases do, unless you're, a really young team or rebuilding. Obviously, there's single elimination in the NFL, and it's a lot different, way fewer games. But in the NBA, I think you can count on one hand the number of true contenders. And I think in the last 2 years, it seems like it's been, two, Cleveland or Golden State, and maybe San Antonio, depending on, their health and how they were playing. So I think the NBA definitely wants to fix that. They've tried to do some things with the new collective bargaining agreement to keep players and stars with their current teams. That's what the whole designated player extension is about. It's allowing teams to, pay their players the most amount of money, and it incentivizes stars to stay with their teams that drafted them. But no, I mean, if I'm a GM right now and I'm looking at the NBA and I'm looking at the Warriors, I think I would just punt the next 4 or 5 years and build for the future. You almost have to, because I don't see a scenario where if you're a team that is in the middle of the pack right now, I don't see a scenario unless you're able to convince multiple stars to come together, which I don't see happening. I don't see the stars that are out there that are available to do that. I think you almost just say, Golden State's not going anywhere. Can we be a team that's a contender 5-6 years from now whenever this super team's on the decline, whenever these guys' contracts are up? I almost think, that's my take. And other people may disagree with me. Maybe people think that's the wrong approach, but I would almost be looking toward the future and just kind of realize that this Golden State team and this Cleveland team, if Golden State is injured or whatever, these two teams are just so much better than everyone else that you almost want to look ahead to the future.
That's not a good league, right? I mean, that's bad for business. That's a big problem.
That is a huge problem. Yeah, and
you mentioned parity, Alec. You mentioned parity. That's what the league wants. The league has never really had. I mean, we've only had 10 champions going back to '94. So the league has never really had parity, but they also never had this big of a disparity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they haven't had parity, but you've had intense playoff series. You've had competition in both conferences. I think this is the first time in these last few years are the first time in a while where it was pretty obvious throughout the entire season which team was going to come out of each conference. And really having two of these super teams, it makes things so much harder on every other team because before, the goal was get one star. Every GM was talking about trying to find their star, and that's what we really saw, in the last kind of era. The Lakers had Kobe. You had Tracy McGrady. You had Vince Carter. You had these guys that, Tim Duncan, for example. Teams wanted one star, then you put a supporting cast around them. Now you almost have to have 3 stars in order to compete for a championship, and it's so hard to be able to get 3 stars. You have to either do it through the draft and get, extremely lucky. Golden State was able to do that by drafting Curry, Thompson, and Green, and then signing Durant, obviously. Or you have to, make really good trades and get lucky in free agency. Cleveland kind of lucked into LeBron and Kyrie Irving, really, and then that led to Kevin Love and some of the other pieces. So it's really difficult. There's no real good answer. I think the NBA really has to try to, put more things in place to keep teams from being able to do this and load up on star players, because you're going to have you're going to continue to have boring regular season and boring postseasons up until an epic finals matchup. If the finals are exciting every year, yes, that's a fun 7 games, 6 games, but it doesn't make up for the lack of quality basketball the rest of the year.
Yeah, and you think, by the way, the ratings last night were good. I mean, they were down about 5%, which I was kind of surprised back. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, Alex, that really since July 7th when Durant signed, the hype machine began. It was the trilogy. This is what you were getting. So it was almost a year in the making, and that the ratings were down slightly. It was still the 3rd most watched game, I think, on ABC. But, this was what everybody had kind of been anticipating. Do you think we're going to get more games similar to last night, or do you think this series gets a little bit more competitive?
I think it gets more competitive. I think we're going to see Cleveland play better basketball. They turn the ball over 20 times, as I mentioned. I don't think they're going to do that again. They're a better team when they're at home, too, so I think that's going to help them whenever this series does shift to Cleveland. I think that Golden State is good enough to blow out Cleveland and just really pull away in the series and make it pretty anticlimactic. But Cleveland is a very good team, and they're a streaky shooting team too. They're a team that can really get hot from three. And anytime you have a team like that and a team with LeBron, it's really hard to count them out. So I do think they can, keep this thing competitive, maybe take it to 6 games, hopefully 7 for our sake. That would be a lot of fun. But they're going to definitely have to make adjustments and play much better on the offensive end. And then, like you said, try to find a way to slow down Durant if it's possible.
Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com. The NBA Finals continue on Sunday night. And, of course, last year it was 2-0, and then it went to Cleveland, and then it was 2-1, then 3-1, and then we know an epic comeback here. This time, if it gets to 2-0, though, are you concerned for Cleveland if they get down, if they lose big again tomorrow? If we have a similar – they lost by 33 in Game 2 last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would be concerned. I think one of the things this Warriors team kind of learned from last year losing that 3-1 lead was, not to take their foot off the gas. And I think, having Kevin Durant there gives them, another weapon. It's going to be a lot harder if the Cavs, dig themselves into a hole like that to climb out of it, because Golden State has learned from their mistakes. I think, you're not going to see them do some of the same things they did last year. Draymond Green's going to be on his best behavior. And then if they are missing a guy, then you have, other players like Durant that can step up in his place. So I would be concerned if Cleveland drops another game, especially with the blowout, because then, that just says that, Golden State's a much better team. And if it's a blowout, then I think that's when you start to see Cleveland maybe, lose some of their confidence and start to doubt themselves. And that's the worst thing you can do against a super team. You have to believe you're the better team. You can't be, feeling like you're going to lose before you even enter the building. So that's why this next game is important. Even if Cleveland doesn't win, they have to keep it close, and they have to compete.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought going into the series, I don't know what your prediction was at the start of the series, but I had Warriors in 5 with Durant winning the MVP. And I said the X factor, the long shot guy for Cleveland to win, to be the MVP, was Kevin Love. I thought he could have been, similar to how Durant is a matchup problem, that Love could have been a guy, if he was as hot as he's been, and he could really make a difference, but he did not play well last night. And you see Love being able to become a factor again, and do you agree that he needs to really be the X factor for Cleveland? Because LeBron and Kyrie are going to be the guys for them, but I think if Love doesn't hold up his end of the bargain, they got no shot.
Yeah, I agree with you. To answer your first question, my prediction going into the series, it was Warriors in 6, and I actually had Draymond Green as Finals MVP. I just thought, the way he's playing right now, he's shooting lights out. He's filling the stat sheet with rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, and I thought it would be kind of interesting if he, was putting up triple-doubles and playing well on both ends of the floor. I thought he could maybe win Finals MVP, but with the way Curry and Durant are playing right now, it's hard to imagine that happening if Golden State does win. So, but I think, Kevin Love has to play well for Cleveland to have a chance. Kyrie Irving does such a terrific job getting to the basket and scoring the ball. You know what you're going to get from LeBron. Love is kind of the X factor, as you said. When he's knocking down threes, when he's rebounding the ball really well, when he's playing good defense, this team is so much better. So I think he definitely has to play well. But it's a tough matchup for him. Draymond Green is someone that's just one of the best defenders in the NBA. He can guard Love all the way out to the perimeter. He can guard him in the interior. It's a real tough matchup for Love, but that's where Cleveland needs to, kind of step up on the offensive end, especially with Love, if they want to be able to keep things close. And if it's not Love, then that's where you need shooters like J.R. Smith, Channing Frye, Kyle Korver. You need those guys to get hot and just start knocking down threes. Otherwise, Kyrie and LeBron aren't going to have much help, and they can't do it by themselves.
We could talk basketball for hours, Alex and I'm sure. And, we got so much more to get into this series. Hopefully by the time next Friday hits, we are getting into, a really deep, well-played series. And then we have some really good stuff, and that we're not really saying, hey, Alex, who do you think the Sixers are going to take at number 3?
Yeah, I hope we're talking about, close games, great series. Hopefully we get some close games here going forward. Hopefully we get 7 games. I think that would be a lot of fun. For every fan base outside of Golden State and Cleveland. I think every fan base wants 7 games, except for the teams, the fans of these teams. But yeah, I mean, hopefully game 1 isn't an indication of what the rest of the series is going to look like.
Yeah, this has been the ultimate turnaround, too. Like, LeBron has played most of his career as the villain. Durant was like the underdog babyface, and it is flipped here. I mean, Durant's the villain, LeBron's the underdog. It is kind of crazy how same 3 teams, completely different roles.
Yeah,
or
and
same
Steph Curry
2 teams, 3 years, different roles.
Yeah, Steph Curry, too, was kind of the guy everyone loved a few years ago. He was a guy that everyone was rooting for, and his jersey was all, selling, and it was a hot item. And then, Kevin Durant was so likable, everyone loved him. And then now I think because the Warriors got so good, started really beating teams, and people, started thinking Steph was a little bit cocky. I think with Durant changing teams, that led to a lot of people not liking him. Draymond Green kind of embraced the villain role. So this Warriors team has a lot of guys that are in that villain role. And LeBron, by going home and by winning a championship last year and really earning the respect of even his biggest critics, I think he is someone that people root for now a little bit more. So it's interesting. I mean, I definitely think the roles have shifted, and it's interesting to see how everyone's kind of adapting to that.
All right, Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com, at Alex Kennedy NBA. We can listen to Game 2 Sunday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Alex, have a good weekend, pal.
You too. Take care. Thanks a lot.